What is happening, kids? My name is Mike at Filmboy24. Today, we're going to examine and shoot and process and scan and then re-examine. No, that's not Kodachrome in there. But what is it? First and foremost, thank you everybody that has subscribed, liked, commented, and, well, you know, just enjoyed my videos for the last 9 months. I'm very new at this. I absolutely love doing this, and I'm going to continue doing this as long as you continue to subscribe, like, and comment. So I'll give you a second right now to do that. Just do some of those things. I appreciate it, everybody. So what are we doing today? No, it's not Kodachrome 25 Day. In fact, today is sort of uncharted territory for me. I'm a film guy. I've shot film for the better part of 35 years. But I've never, ever shot 8mm film. I've shot a lot of Super 8, but you see this is 8mm or double 8 because it's actually 16mm wide. Let me show you. You see, this is a 16mm film strip. This is a double 8 film strip. That's just a piece of film I cut off of a roll. But they're identical in width. They are identical in perforations. Except the double 8 has twice as many. So if you were to sort of hold them up together, you can match the perforations perfectly. But then you move it a little, and the double 8 has twice as many. Well, that's because there's twice as many frames in an 8mm. There's actually 4 times as many frames in this piece of film as in this piece of film. Because you see, this fills the entire top, bottom, left, right. This splits it in half and in half again. It's really not that complicated. I'm not a Wikipedia film nerd guy. There's plenty of those out there. So if you're interested in the science and the breakdown of frame sizes, etc., go on Wikipedia. It's there. All I can tell you is 16mm film was introduced sometime in the early 20s. They started making double 8 film sometime in the early 30s and sort of kept going from there. You see, there really isn't any 8mm wide film manufactured. I don't know that there ever has been. To this day, Kodak actually still doesn't manufacture from scratch Super 8mm film. They actually cut it from 35mm film, and they always have. 8mm is really no different. The user or the lab cuts that from 16mm film to make 8. So that's enough history. That's as deep as I'm going to go. My foray into 8mm film isn't probably the norm. You see, I took out my Bolex H8. Now, I bought this a long time ago, and I've got it right here. See, there's my H8. It's very similar to the H16, only the gate is only 8mm wide, and it takes D-mount lenses, whereas the H16 takes the C-mount lenses. Now, I bought this camera, like I do a lot of things, in a bulk lot of stuff at a garage sale. It's had a couple of these Bolex H cameras in the lot, tons of lenses, tons of viewfinders, all kinds of stuff. And I only paid, I don't remember, 150, 200 bucks for everything. So I wasn't expecting any of this to work. Now, a lot of the lenses were in really good shape, so I was already ahead of the game. Took this camera, bought this FPP 100 ISO black and white 100-foot roll of black and white reversal film, packed it up, packed this up, had it a half an hour away from my house, and I couldn't get it to work properly. You see, I think somebody tried to repair this at one time. The camera runs great, but the pull-down claw, I think it was reversed with the, it's a dual claw system, and I think those two claws were reversed somehow, because the claw is just literally attacking the in between the perforations in the film. At any rate, I tried for a half an hour to get this to run. I have an H16 that I use a lot, so I'm well aware of how to make these run properly. Couldn't do it. So I also have a couple of the old Bolex sort of standard 8 movie cameras. Took both of those out. I think I have the DS8, or I don't remember the model numbers. One of them is here. One of them, it happens to be right here. And I actually stole one of the lenses off of it. You know, these guys here. I have a couple of these. And they both need disassembly and lube because they do the, you know, Ben over at Zero Budget Film School, he knows what I'm talking about. You got to take those apart and you got to clean them and you got to relube them. Well, I haven't done that. So I was down to one option for my first attempt at 8mm movie film. And that's the only camera I have that actually works properly. That's my Revere 8 magazine camera. But the problem was, I don't know how to load a magazine. You're not really supposed to load these magazines. You see, Kodak is supposed to load these magazines. Well, I'm a do-it-yourselfer. You guys know that. I got to try to figure it out. So I took one apart. I used a sort of a donor roll that I had in my freezer for years. An old Kodachrome 25, expired in 1980. And I knew I really probably wasn't going to get any good images off of this. And even if I got some halfway decent images, it was worth the sort of the donation to pop it apart and take a peek inside. So I did just that. I'm not going to go over exactly how to load one of these today. If you're interested in learning how to open one of these AA magazines, take the old film out of it and reload it with brand new, delicious, and juicy film, let me know. I'll make a quick video on it. It's really not that difficult. There's only a couple of things you really have to know how to do when you do this, a couple of things you need to remember. And I actually think these are a little bit easier to load than the 16mm counterpart. At any rate, once I learned how to load them, it took me about an hour to figure that out. I took out my donor, took it completely apart, which essentially is just take the tape off the edges, and I reloaded it with this FPP, as you can see, black and white 100 ISO reversal film. Now, if you're not like me, and hopefully not many of you are, FPP does offer these little cartridges already preloaded. They do the loading there. You basically just buy the package. You buy the cartridge. You shoot it. You flip it over. You shoot the other side. You send it to them. They process it. They scan it. They send it back to you. Way easier to do it that way. I'm not affiliated with the I'm not affiliated with FPP. I just really like what they do. And they got good products too. They always keep film alive. Anyway, I'm a do-it-yourselfer. So I loaded this up. I actually loaded this one up with this film. And since I'd never shot it before, I loaded it into this camera. And what you do with these cartridges, or these magazines, is you load them into a magazine-ready camera. Not all of these cameras are magazine-ready. Some of them take little spools, kind of like the Bolexes. This one takes a magazine. Handily enough, a lot of these magazines are labeled. Use this side first. When you've shot that 25 feet, flip it over, and then use this side. That simply means you insert it, much like you do a Super 8 cartridge, into your camera, snap it in place, close it up, lock the door, wind the camera, because most all of these old 8mm cameras are just wind-up cameras. You wind it up. I'm not going to shoot it because I already did. You run for 25 feet because these magazines hold 25 feet of film. When you're finished, you will hear the camera sort of change its noise because it stops pulling the film. You pop the film cartridge out. You flip it over, push it back in, snap it in place, and you repeat the process 25 feet again. So what the camera does is it splits the film. It splits the film in half. When you shoot, it's only shooting 8mm or one side of your film. You flip the cartridge over, it shoots the other side of your film. It's brilliant. After you are finished with that, then you need some way to cut the film in half. Unless you get it scanned in its native 16mm width, which is possible. I use the MovieStuff Retro Scan. I've never tried scanning this in 16 millimeters wide. Maybe if Roger Evans is watching this video, he'll leave a comment and let us know. Or maybe I'll just try it and we'll find out. Outside of that, I have this little film slitter, and you simply feed one end of the 16 millimeter film through one side, you pull it through, and it slits your film exactly in half. And I'm going to show you with this sample strip. Feed it in, get the roller started. And there's a couple of variations. I think there's a round one of these too. I kind of like this little square one. It sits flat. So when you get it started and then you pull it through, ta-da! You have two 8 millimeter strips of film. And then the theory behind this was to then flip it over and you splice it together after you drop it, and then you have one continuous 50-foot length of 8 millimeter film. So with that, I have not processed this film, which is what I plan to do right now. So if you, that was loud, if you will do me a solid and stay tuned for a micromillisecond just for a second, I'm going to have this processed and scanned when you see me again. And woo! Well, that was an adventure. It's been about 4 hours since I was sitting here. For you, it's been instantaneous. But I took this 8 millimeter. I had to go pick up my girls from school in the interim. So if you hear my little one in there singing Happy and You Know It, then yeah. At any rate, I had to take this apart. I pulled the film out of it. I wound it in a little makeshift board onto my Lomo tank spiral. And it's only 25 feet, so it only filled about half the spiral, which was perfect. I processed it in D96 at 68 degrees Fahrenheit for 7 minutes. Fixed it for 6 minutes. Rinsed it off and spooled it onto one of these 50-foot 16 millimeter reels. From there, I took my handy dandy Baya, I believe it's called, film slitter. I decided to forego my test with the retro scan and see if I could scan 16 millimeter wide, just, you know, both at the same time. I'm not interested in that right now, but Roger, if you're listening or watching, I don't know why you would be, but if you are, can you scan on the retro scan 888 film without slitting it? I don't know. But I used my little slitter here and cut it in half, as you saw a minute ago how to use that. So I was essentially going from this to this, rewinds, so I had two slit 8 millimeters over here, and then I went, it's a little wonky. I think the hardest part, there is a little bit of a learning curve to this. The hardest part was kind of getting the orientation right after it was slit and getting it spliced together the right way. Took me a try or two, but I finally did it. And here it is, the finished film. Let me tell everyone right now, I'm a fan of this stuff. I'm a huge fan of 8 millimeter now. Thank you to my buddy Cecil DeVille. We've been emailing a little bit back and forth. He's pretty well versed in this this old 8 millimeter game, and he's given me some pointers and whatnot and kind of kicked me in the right direction. And I'm glad he did. And he told me, he goes, buy yourself the 100-foot reel because you can spool it down. Well, and I had decided I was just going to use it in my Bolex like I talked about earlier. That didn't work out. This is on a daylight spool. So in the dark, you need to spool it down onto one of these little reels for your 8 millimeter magazine. So you spool it onto one of these. One thing that I did notice, unlike the 16 millimeter magazines like this, the emulsion goes out on these. In other words, see, EI is the standard for a lot of 16 millimeter film. And that's really what this is with double perfs, or twice as many perfs on each side. And EI simply means emulsion in, and 90% of the film that I've seen is emulsion in. So you have to backwind it backwards and put the emulsion out. Because when you load these little magazines, if these are real simple, they literally just go from one reel through the gate to the other reel. So the emulsion has to be out because it's what gets exposed to light. So I think that tripped me up just a little bit, not in loading the magazine, but in loading my Lomo. Because the emulsion needs to be in when you load your spiral on your Lomo. Because you don't want your emulsion to touch the inner grooves on your spiral. And the emulsion in doesn't allow that to happen. Well, the emulsion was out on this one, and it sort of white splotched a lot of my edges, and I know that's why. Live and learn. So these cartridges, you know, they've been around for a long, long time. I mean, I have some examples here. It's all Kodachrome, and I have some examples here. Expired 1956, expired 1954, expired 1958. The film's no good, but you can pull the film, you can buy some FPP, double 8 film, load it up, or just buy the cards already loaded, and have fun with it. So there was a couple of issues. There was at times a little something, a little hair or something in the gate. There is a vertical scratch all the way down the far right side of a lot of my frame. I don't know if that's from my slitter or if that is from, it's probably from the inside of this magazine, rubbing against something. It's extremely uniform, which leads me to believe it's either the slitter or the inside of this particular magazine. I don't know how precision these are or nice and smooth, but that's something that probably should be checked out beforehand. So with that, keep that in mind. There is a lot of white, bright, splotchy on one side on a certain portion of this film. It's not perfect by any means, but boy, was it fun. And now my subject matter, it's just my backyard again. I wasn't going to take this exploring the country when I've never shot this film before. Just wanted to see what 8mm did for me and whether or not I enjoyed it. So I'm going to show you the film right now, and you just give me your thoughts. Here it is. Well, there it is. I'm hooked on 8mm film. I knew probably once I tried it, I was going to love it. The image is beautiful. I would say almost better than Super 8. I know there's, there's someone in each camp. This is better, this is better. I don't know. I got to do some more tests. I get that Bolex H8 working properly. We're going to try a full roll of that, and it goes a long way also. Now, that was shot at 24 frames per second. I know standard 8, it's typically shot at 16 frames per second, or at least it was in the olden days. I'm not that old. So I'm a 24 frames per second guy, always have been. I want to try this in color. FPP has some of this in color, 40 ISO. Let's see what that does. I'm going to get the Bolex H8 up and running. If not, I'm going to pick up a nice little 25-foot reel camera, 8mm camera, so that I don't mess too much with these magazines, although they're fun and they're handy. If you enjoy videos like this, how about do me a huge favor? Punch that like button for me. Subscribe, leave me a comment, tell me what your thoughts are on 8mm film versus Super 8. I've shot a lot of Super 8. And until the very next time that I see every single one of you beautiful people, I don't know what the head bob is. I'll see you on the next go around.